Hello and welcome back to BSO Rugby, and Major League Rugby Season 5 is just around the corner. On today's video, I sat down with hosts of the Rugby Rant podcast, Rob the Hammer Schmidt, and of course Scott the Big Guy Ferrara, to have a chat about the Western Conference and how the teams were going to do. We had a chat, of course, about new players coming in, changes at the helm of different clubs, and what were their expectations for each side. As always, if you do enjoy this video, hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and of course, let me know your predictions in the comments down below. And the Eastern Conference preview will be out tomorrow night as well. So hit that subscribe button and the notification bell for that as well. Big shout out to the guys from the Rugby Rant for jumping on. The links to everything that they do will be down below. They're way more knowledgeable than I am. So if you want to keep up to date with all things MLR, make sure to check them out. Enjoy this preview. We're going to start with the Austin Gilgronis first of all. I was just looking through their last season, finished third in the Western Conference last year. Much of a better performance than in 2019, and then 2020, of course, the season was cancelled. But what did you make of them last year, Scott? Much improved, weren't they?
They were much improved, and you could tell, this is something me and Rob talked about, personally. Their front office was kind of in disarray the past 2 years in 2019, 2020. And you kind of see how that affected the players, and it kind of dripped down to the team. This past year, their front office was, good. No, changes, crazy changes. It dripped down to the players. The players played well. I still feel like, they got Ruben DeHaas mid-season, and they kind of stepped away from what they were doing in the first couple matches. And Rob knows the first half of the season, they won some, they lost some, but the ones they lost were pretty tight. At certain points they were really tight. And then they went to Ruben DeHaas, and as everybody in Wales and the rest of the UK know, he's a box kicking style scrummy. I don't think that fit their offensive style, and I felt like their offensive production was depleted after that because they just kind of went, and it essentially looked like an American version of the Saracens, except for the fact that everybody else on the team doesn't fit that model. So this year, Danny Barrett, probably going to be the captain of that team, in my opinion, coming off the USA Sevens team. He's we call him Bad News Barrett for a reason. He's a rough and tumble guy. He's a blue collar, hardworking type of dude that sets that tone. So honestly, I think they're going to do even better this year. I think those tight matches that they lost now become wins, and they're going to do some business in the Western Conference.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they get on. Rob, what kind of players should people be looking out for? I picked Mac Mason. Is it? He obviously is very high up on the kicking scores from last year. What other players should people be keeping an eye out on? Who could be key to their success this season?
Well, I think and again, sorry for folks in the UK, but I love watching and seeing developing American players. Because that's ultimately why I think the league was initially started. And in that regard, watch Connor Mooneyham. He's on the wing. Immediately when he jumped from college, he played at Life University. He was a year or two older than most guys coming out because he had stepped away from rugby for a year while he was in uni. And then he returned, was an absolute animal for life. And then physically, he just had all the tools necessary to step immediately on the pitch and be an electric force. He battled with a few injuries last year that kept him out of the lineup on for all 16 games. But when he was in there, he was somebody that the opposition had to pay attention to. So I really like Connor Mooneyham quite a bit. And as you said, Mac Mason, it'll be interesting to see if he's at fly half at 10, controlling the pace and the rhythm of the game, or whether they put him at fullback. We have a few options at some of those key positions, especially with at 15. They have a kicking fullback. Scott, help me out. I always want to say Ryan Mattias, but he's out in San Diego.
It's God. Oh, I'm blanking on it.
Yeah.
Oh God. Listen, there's what 500 guys in the MLR contracted, so we can't remember all of them.
Yeah.
How dare you.
And I'm 51, so sometimes memory ails me. But yeah, I really want to watch Connor Mooneyham, see how he develops in the sophomore year.
And also, I just want to piggyback on Rob. Connor Mooneyham probably would have been the rookie of the year had he not get injured. Andrew Guerra winning Rookie of the Year last year, but Connor Mooneyham was set up until Nola Gold and Andrew Guerra was set up to do that. And also, don't forget our buddy Larome White, who probably had the play of the front row of the entire season.
2 plays in the front row.
Yeah, he had two back-to-back interceptions that were. He's a prop that he ran for more than 60 meters each. To take it to the house.
Absolute barnstorming runs. I mean, it is. Check out the highlights. Larome White gets 2 intercept tries, and a beast of a man, and he just cooks it down the pitch.
From both of you, then, what is the expectation for the season? How do you see them doing this year? We'll go to Scott first of all. How are you seeing it for them?
Well, this year the playoffs change, so we'll talk about playoffs. What they're doing is the top 3 teams in each conference go to the playoffs. 2 plays 3, 1 gets a bye week, and then whoever the winner is plays 1 in the semifinal. I do think Austin has a chance to get into the playoffs, a very good chance. I think the Western Conference this year is just going to be as tight as the Eastern Conference last year. When we go through those teams, from last year in the Eastern Conference, it was like top 2 went to the playoffs. The top 4 in the conference were fighting away until the end, and it came down to bonus points. That's what's going to happen this in the West Coast this year. I honestly think Austin fights for that number 3 slot to get in.
Yeah.
And for you, Rob, you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think they're really going to feel the loss of Jamie McIntosh in the front row, the WAPA, former All Black. I think he's 6'4", 6'5", about 280. Obviously, you're going to miss somebody like that locking down the front row, the scrums, and on the pitch management and field presence, right? He is going to still be with the team as assistant coach, so they're not going to totally lose his services, but obviously it changes the dynamics when you lose somebody like that from. And then they also, their lock, former All Black lock, and again, I can't remember his name, former All Black lock, who came in like 2 or 3 games into the season last season and really helped to lock down their line out, will not be back. He was 37 and prone to injury. So he stepped away from the team as well. So they're going to miss that. I would say also 3, it's all relative because I think LA got strong. A couple other teams picked up, Houston picked up a pretty good roster. I think they're going to be much improved. I'm sure we'll get to them. So I think it's going to be a pretty good battle, like Scott said, in the East for those 3 spots. In the West for those 3 spots.
And let's move on to a team that have no history in the MLR so far, to an extent. Obviously, they were meant to join about a year ago, was it? Weren't quite ready. That's the Dallas Jackals. Scott, can you explain a little bit about that situation? What happened with them? Because it looks like they weren't quite ready, were they?
Well, I think what it came down to was the scramble to try and find a place to play, and this is something that New York, Rugby New York always has an issue with as well. Being in New York, it's tough to find places that will allow a commercial professional team to go use their field due to liability and all that stuff. And in 2021 with COVID, that was even more so. And I think what happened was, in my opinion, because Dallas had all their management set up, they had all their coaching set up, they had all their players signed, but I don't think they could find a field with whatever restrictions they had. And instead of trying to jump around and do all these other things, they decided we're just going to wait. Unfortunately, they made that decision about 2 weeks before the season started. And there's certain situations of certain players. For example, there's 2 types of contracts. There's a regular contract where we've contracted Brandon Smith. We're going to pay him X amount for the season. And then there's per diem players who get paid by the day. Per diem players aren't able to be picked up in the supplemental draft. And there are some guys who are big names that become per diem players because they don't want to put a financial burden on the team, and they know that they can do endorsements and stuff to make other money, right? So there's quite a few guys that were actually per diem players that couldn't be in the supplemental draft, and then that way their rights had to stay with Dallas, and they really couldn't do anything. I think that was the most disappointing part for me and Rob, because we know those guys, and we know that a lot of them moved down there to be with this new team from other places, and then it kind of got taken out from under them. But saying that, they have a full detail of players. They have a place to play. They are playing. They're on the schedule. The schedule hasn't been changed. They're the 7th team in the Western Conference down in Dallas. And, we got some notable names. Alex Tucci moving from Utah to Dallas as a prop. And Alex Tucci, actually one of the famous Twitch streamers of the MLR, believe it or not. Carla Denising going in at scrum half. Aaron Gray on the wing. He's going to be a big one. Campbell Johnstone moving from the Gilgronis over to Dallas. So, I mean, they have a team here. As far as how they're going to do, remains to be seen. You know, a lot of new names, a lot of new faces. You know, couple big names, but it's rough. You know, I think it's going to be a little more rough for them. I think Houston and AGs have hit a stride as far as the teams they want and the teams they have. So we're going to see what happens.
Yeah, and what's the expectation, Rob? Sorry, what's the expectation for them this season? Because it's a new team, players who probably have really hard. Well, they wouldn't have played a competitive game as such together. So, what will be the challenges for them this year? Do you think?
Well, they actually just played a preseason match, I believe, as of the taping of the show. It was yesterday. And so they're trying to get some miles under the belt. But to be fair, I think they're struggling with a couple things. First of all, it is good to see and a feather in the cap of Dallas. They have Elaine Vassy, who comes from the UK, has been involved with professional, amateur and professional rugby there in the UK, and then has come over, been involved at both levels here. So first female GM, which is awesome to see. It's really shown how the league is emphasizing diversity in a lot of different ways. But they don't have a head coach, from what we're understanding. We have some friends down in Dallas who really pay attention to the fan groups down there. Shout out to Rick Collins, our guy. And I think that's a struggle, you know, when you lack leadership and a direction, and so far as, you know, the pace of play and how they want to play. You can have some of the best players in the world, but if there's no vision for how the team ought to gel and come together and play, that is going to be a challenge. And I think that's going to show on the field. So I don't expect a ton from them. I take a different view than Scott, and that's a fun thing about the Rugby Rant is we love to disagree, Scott and I, but we agree on the fact that we both love rugby. So, but you know, I think it came down to the fact that due to COVID, they realized, and the slumping initial season ticket sales, I think they really saw the bottom line struggling, and they felt like that they were going to be putting out a lot of cash in order to keep the team afloat. And if you remember last year, while that was all being done, it was a question whether teams would actually get a full season in, you know, and I think that those concerns caused them to back off a little bit and look to 2022 as an opportunity to get on the pitch first. So regardless, I do think you're going to see them at the bottom of the Western Conference. I think it's just going to be a struggle. Other teams got better, and they're just starting out, and it's going to be a tough road to hoe over the next 16 games starting on February 5th.
And Scott, do you think that will be accepted by the fans? They'll be understood that, you know, it is a process, it's a new team. We don't even have a head coach at the minute. Do you think that'll be understood by the fans?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to realize, you know, these Dallas fans were fans of other Texas teams, and they've seen the struggles that they have gone through. I got to say, we have a draft in the MLR, which is probably foreign to all you UK viewers. You know, that we don't really, while we have academies in the United States, we actually take players from college and they're selected by the team and their rights are kept. And one of those players that was selected by Dallas is Decor Davis. And you're going to watch him. You're going to see him, and he's going to make some plays between him at number 8 and Bronson Tellis in the back row there. You're going to see those two guys make some great offensive plays and make some highlights. So be on the lookout. I don't think Dallas is going to make the playoffs this year, but I do think that Decor Davis might be the rookie of the year.
And watch out for Alejandro Torres. He was also picked up the draft, but he's actually, I believe, Argentinian. And I watched some of his highlight films, and I couldn't believe other teams didn't pick him up. Dallas got him in one of the later rounds, and he's so slick. He's going to control the pace at number 10. I sure hope he gets a real good chance to show his skills and improve his skills, because I think he could be a bright light on that team.
Yeah, it's going to be a process, isn't it? A new team, new players playing together. No head coach yet. Don't know if either of you are interested.
But hey, and it's worth noting, by the way, Brandon, that the NOLA Gold fans are going to be traveling to Dallas. So, you know, I don't think they're going to be wanting for fans to show up in the stands. You know, it's just a question of they're going to watch the team struggle in that first year until they find the footing.
And let's move on to the Houston Sabercats. Once again, when I was looking before at their record last year, finished bottom of the conference. Really, really tough year for them. Only 2 wins out of 16 games. They have signed a couple of South African players. Dean being one. So it's going to be an interesting year for them. But from what I've heard already from you guys, Scott, you seem a little bit more optimistic about them this year.
I do. They've become, the South African junior team with Heineke Meyers going over there to be the GM, which is a whole nother thing because I believe he's only there on a tourist visa right now. So I don't know how much work he can actually do till they sort out his visa issues, which obviously is a problem everywhere throughout rugby. But yeah, they came on last year. They were another team where, like the Gilgronis, they had a lot of tight games and then they just lost. So I think this could be the turnaround of winning those tight games. Nick Boyer being the scrummy over there. We're very excited about Nick Boyer. Again, young Americans, we love to talk about them. He was traded, I believe, right? Was he traded from Giltinis last year? Yeah, he was on
right
Giltinis last year, right before the start of the season. Yeah.
We interviewed him, and he was in Hawaii with LA, and then within a couple of weeks, he was shipped on over to Houston.
Yeah, and they have this big center, Varamu Diki Lati, who, I mean, he's like 6'2", 270, and he's from Fiji, and he runs like a goddamn Mack truck. So, Houston's there. They're going to make some plays. I have a little hesitance about their front row. Not that they're not good. I just, again, it's about finding the right guys to pull together to actually, play as a unit. And sometimes they've been lacking in that portion. I think they will fight for a playoff spot. I think they will have more wins this year than they did last year. But it might be a little, kind of disjointed. Also, I almost forgot. Sam Windsor leaving the team and coming to New York. He's their number one point scorer. So that's a big blow.
Yeah, and for you, Rob, how do you see them getting on this year? Do you think playoff maybe a little bit step too far?
If you'd asked me to a month ago, I would have said no. I would have said they're going to compete for a playoff spot. One of the things that let's see how it's going to play out is, like Scott mentioned, those visa issues. They played Dallas this last weekend. They were supposed to send a squad to play NOLA in a tune-up match, although I don't know that was an official match, but the folks down in NOLA were talking about it, and then they had to bail on it from what folks in NOLA are saying. This, I'm not going to say this officially reported, but folks in NOLA are saying that. And they definitely had to change some of their travel plans due to some of those visa issues. So, how many of those guys have yet to show up in the United States and been able to, actually put in some work with the rest of the boys is unknown at this juncture. But that could really make it difficult here in the early runnings. I think one of the things that we've seen from the MLR is that, and I'll speak for my NOLA Gold. NOLA Gold went on won 5 of the last 6 away games on the road games, and just missed out on the playoffs. Why was that? Well, some of those early games in which they were, lost 1 or 2 points. Austin was one of those losses. Those made a difference on the table. And so, with 16 games, it's not like the Prem where you have 23. All right, where you can have an off game, or you can have a couple guys out for a few games and still make it up the difference on the table. I think it's going to be difficult if they are missing some of those players early on. Worth noting for me is Emmanuel Albert, again, big supporter of the Lindenwood Lions up there. Emmanuel Albert, Tinashe Machena, 2 guys that were drafted by them, young guys, back row guys that, will they see the field with all the South Africans initially? I don't know, but I'd love to see them develop well under Meyer's guidance.
Yeah. And so predictions for this year then, Scott, how do you see them going? Where are you going to put them?
I think they just missed the playoffs. I think they're in that 4th, 5th place region.
Yeah. Interesting to see.
Agreed. I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
Yeah. Let's move on then to last season's champions, the LA Giltinis. Seem to sign every single player who was at their peak in 2008, 2009. They went through that period of doing that. Sorry to stop the video just there, folks. Just to let you know that this was recorded a couple of days before the news came out that Matt Giteau had re-signed for the Giltinis. So just bear that in mind as we chat about them now. So Matt Giteau was confirmed about 2 days ago while I'm editing this that he was going to be signing on for the upcoming season in MLR. So bear that in mind as you listen. If you're enjoying, hit the subscribe button, by the way, folks. Leave a like and get your thoughts in the comments. Let's get back to it. They still do have some quality players. DTH Van der Merwe. They've signed Tom Mitchell, former England Sevens captain, as well. Play at the Coliseum in LA. They're big. They're loud. They're pretty confident, of course. But can they do it again, Scott? How do you see them going this year?
I think they can do it again. They had a big signing in Hanko Hermesice moving from New York to LA. That kind of rocked the MLR world as far as this is Hanko's fourth team in 5 years. So he's moving around to teams he thinks are going to win. And I think that's indicative of the power that the players are now getting over their contracts and saying, "This is what I want. I want to go to a place that can win, and I will. If I'm not getting what I feel I'm valued, I will go somewhere else." Sean McNulty signed again. Blake Rogers still there, stalwart prop. They can do it again. They do have guys that are just as good this year that were there last year. I mean, it's tough to talk single outs like one or two guys. John Ryberg, big part of their scoring offense last year, seemed to be on everybody's hip when they were out in open play and getting that extra pass to just dot it down. And to his credit, he always credited whoever made the pass, saying, "Hey, they really scored the try on that one." So it really is a team mentality and a team full of guys who you would think would be, have that superstar mentality. Believe it or not, they do kind of work together as a team, and it shows. It's tough. Christian Rodriguez, young scrum half, got a lot of playing time last year in the dead minutes of some games. Started a couple games due to injury. Honestly, I'd really like to see him somewhere else. I think he starts on another team. I know Rob agrees with me on that. We talk about Roddy all the time. He's our boy. And then Pago Hani leaving LA and moving to New York. So it's almost as if Hanko and Pago kind of just almost switched teams there at that flanker position. They're gonna be tough to beat. I mean, in my opinion, I think they're number one, but they could be number two when we talk about some of the other teams later on.
Do you feel like, I don't know, because here in the UK, there was a situation obviously with Saracens with the wage cap, they were paying loads of players, and I'm not saying there is such a thing where they're going over the wages or anything like that, but do you think there is that they're getting that identity now of being the team that pay the big bucks, that can draw the big players because of where they are in the world as well?
They are, but here's the thing. So in the contracts that are for the MLR, right? So the MLR has all the contracts for each of the players, right? They hold them all, the league, and then the rights are spread out among the teams. Right now in the rules, they have a salary cap, but in that salary cap, it doesn't include any other incentives like a car or a place to live or things like that, because places like New York and LA, obviously the rent's going to be higher. A 2-bedroom apartment in New York City is going to cost you $3,000 a month. In LA, $3,000 a month versus probably Austin, which is half that. So if you put those incentives into the salary cap, New York and LA couldn't field teams, right? So they've just kind of let it go. Now, do I think it's probably getting a little outrageous with some of these extras that LA is giving them? Probably. But you know what? It's not in the rule. They're not breaking a rule. So in my opinion, they're within the bounds.
Interesting to see how that develops. Rob, are they going to do it again this year? Are they going to go all the way, do you think?
I think they're going to be in the Western Conference final. Whether or not they can pull it out, I think they can do it. But quite frankly, last year at the end of the season, I think that they showed that there's chinks in the armor, even with a guy like Adam Ashley Cooper and Matt Gitto. They showed that they were beatable. I mean, Rooney did it. Nola did it.
First team to do it.
Yeah. I think there was one other team that did. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they showed that they're beatable. And I think Rooney did pave the way for how they could be beaten. Without those two key players out, do you have the direction and the guidance on that on the field two generals, if you will, to make things happen? Well, you're going to be missing that. It's a question of who's going to be the distributors on that team. So I think it's going to be a tougher road to hoe. I think they're going to have to battle to do it. They still have the likes of Adam Ashe, Harrison Goddard. Harrison Goddard is really a key distributor for them. Very fast ball, very good off the shoulder and loose play. Very good in counter attack. He's a central figure in their attack. On a note, something that Scott touched upon, I'm hearing from players who will not be named in the league that, it's like even young players who are per diem players, if you get a chance to hang out and have a place in Austin, which is a great city, by the way, would you rather that, or would you rather have a beachfront condo in Malibu? Right? Which would you rather stay at 22, 23 years old as a young guy? So I think that's some of the differential that you're seeing in why LA's pulling players. It's a great place to be. It's obviously an exciting environment for young guys, and it has that draw.
Yeah, it does. One name I saw on the roster for this season was a young Luke Carty, brother of Jack Carty, Irish international. So interested to see how he's going to get on. So predictions for this year, Scott. How far are they going to go, do you think, this year?
I mean, I think they definitely take the number 1 or number 2 spot in the playoffs, and I think they move on. They definitely have the potential to move on to the championship.
Yeah. And for you, Rob, you in agreement with that?
Yeah, I think great minds think alike. I think they're going to be right there. If they'll be, in the finals, they'll probably take that number 1 spot, have the bye the first week of playoffs, and then compete for the opportunity to play in the final. If you held my feet to the fire, I'd say they're going to be in the final.
Interesting to see how they get on. Let's move on then to the San Diego Legion. 4th last year in the Western Conference, 9th overall. Not really a great year considering their standards and where they have been in the past. Of course, some massive names in this squad. Nonu's re-signed. Chris Robshaw's going to be there. Nate Augsburger, of course, US legend. It's a pretty stacked squad, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah, and you can't forget they have this Borjan, the South African in there, who he lit Nola up in that game in which they played out west when Nola traveled out west. I think again, San Diego's got to be put in context. They were dealing with some pretty big challenges at the beginning of last year. They had to go down. Their original plan was to play in Vegas all season. A mate of mine who was trying to organize venues for them, they just had a real tough time. I think they had to go down to their 5th venue, as the city and some of the local municipalities were not playing nice with them, and weren't giving them a home to play at. Their first game was played against Rooney, correct, Scott?
Correct.
The goalposts were practically falling down because they just put the pitch together within the last couple of days. So they struggled with that. Then they ended up going back home. They didn't play in Torero right away. They had to play without some fans. Obviously, they had some injuries. Chris Robshaw went down with a shoulder injury, lost his services quite a bit. So I think they really struggled because, again, with 16 games, you can't afford to lose a couple steps. You might be able to afford to drop a game or two, but you continue, you go into 4th and 5th games, and then you really find out at the end of the season why those matter. So I think that's why they struggled. I think they'll do much better this year. They, of course, they lost the services of Joe Peterson. I do not believe he's with the team, but they did pick up Nonu, and they'll remain a strong team to contend with in the West.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how they go. Obviously, I'm going to try and say his name. Signed from the Glasgow Warriors. Vakaloloma, I think that's how you say. I'm going to go with that. As you can see, I'm not Fijian, but there we go. But it's going to be an interesting year to see how they go. I'm really curious, Scott, to get your thoughts on the balance between getting these superstars like Nonu, like Robshaw, and then, as Rob has alluded to, bringing these young US players through. Do you think the league is getting the balance right, or do you still think it needs to be fine-tuned a little bit?
I think it's team dependent. So two of the players, 2 of the young USA players that are no longer with San Diego. One was just signed with Dallas, Carlo Denison. We spoke about him. The other one, Dylan Audsley, who's taking a couple years off of rugby. He had 2 catastrophic leg injuries back-to-back seasons, and I think he's smart enough to say, "Hey, I need to take a break right now." 2 different legs, 2 different seasons. Rise and grind on trying to rehab your left leg and then your right leg. But San Diego is one of those teams that likes to keep the balance. Patrick Madden on that team, local boy. So yeah, the other thing is you'll start to see. So right now you're allowed what, Rob, 10 foreign players
on the field, and you're starting 23, yeah,
and you're 23, right? So you'll see that teams are now looking at international players, young international players who might have USA or Canadian passports and coming in, even though they're living in, let's say, New Zealand or Australia. And that's not hitting that foreign player spot. And, if they're going to stick around the MLR for 3 years, they could become USA Eagles now with the new standards. So, I mean, I think you're going to see players within the United States come up and rise, and we'll talk about that in the East Coast because there's a lot of Eastern Conference young players who moved around. But I think you're also going to see some players who have American passports that are going to come in to play rugby here. And overall, in my opinion, it just ups the level that the Americans are going to be playing at. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, it helps, with the training, with the preparation, with the rehab, everything, the recovery, and just being a professional on the pitch. Rob, finally then, predictions for San Diego, how they're going to do this year. And can you give us a youngster to keep an eye out on as well?
On the how are they going to do? I think this year they're going to sneak into one of those 3 playoff spots. If you held me to the fire, I would say your 3 playoff spots in the West are going to be Austin, LA, and I think they're going to go 4th because I think Houston's going to sneak in there. So it's going to be close. Like Scott said, it's going to be nip tuck right up to the very end. I think they're going to just miss out. And one of the reasons I think, again, Bassan is up there in age, Rob Shaw is up there in age, Nonu's up there in age, can they take the week in and week out beating and still perform then going into the play, in the final weeks of the season and edge out the playoffs. To be fair, I would love to see Patrick Madden, as Scott mentioned, get some more time. He's one of these young guys who had a lot of promise coming out of college. And this is a struggle that I think that the league has, where you talk about finding that right formula, is that, anytime you bring in foreign players to raise the standard. You bring in high profile names like a Rob Shaw, like a Nonu, like a couple of years ago, a Beast. And you do that to raise the profile in the league, which is great, because as you raise the profile of the league, shows like this rugby come on and they highlight the league and bring the league to new fans overseas. And you have vested interest. Rooney's now owned by a New Zealand outfit. And so you have interest from abroad. But what point does that sacrifice development of young players? Because ultimately, U.S. has their eyes on World Cup 2031, right? And we're 10 years away from that, right? If you stifle the development of those players right now, and work in foreign players, do you stifle that development, and do you kind of cut the nose off to spite your face, so to speak, as a American rugby community?
Let's move on then to the Seattle Seawolves, a really odd team, I find, because first and second year they won it, if I'm correct in saying that. Really, really positive start to MLR, but last season 5th in the Western Conference, 11th overall. Really odd, isn't it, how they've dropped off so much? Is there any hope for this season, Scott? Is there anything that you're seeing that makes you think that things are going to change for them?
Again, another team that, we talk about a lot of teams that are bottom of the barrel in certain seasons. Last season, this was a team that their front office was in turmoil. Coaching changes, presidents resigning before the season, right, Rob? I think you resigned before the season.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right before the season. So how does that drip down to the players, saying your front office is, sinking? But this year, front office is stable, and you could see it with signings like Cole Zarconi from San Diego, Reed Watkins from Toronto, Martin Iosefo, and the newcomer Taviti Lepetti, who really showed and balled out during the international window last year. Big Marty actually was playing in the Premier Sevens when I was there in the Memphis leg, and man, he went crazy. Iosefo was just running guys over. And again, I think as an MLR team, you do have to look at all these competitions and say, hey, will that translate to the way our team works? And that's kind of what Seattle does. They're a big, hulking mass of man meat team that likes to press on the defense and likes to run the ball down your throat. Yes, can they run the pretty plays and get the offloads? Of course. I mean, every rugby team can do that, but I don't think that's the Seawolves identity. But they play to the way that they want to play, and they can win. Do I think they make the playoffs this year? No. Do I think they make a bigger leap? Yes.
And for you, Rob, how do you see them going this year? Because to go from, as I said, to being so consistent at the top of the table to all of a sudden dropping down, do you see any change
Yeah, they won't. I think they're going to be a little bit better than last year. They still have some of their veterans that were on those squads. J.P. Smith, Richard Hadding, Reichard Hadding, excuse me. But they're a year older. But they still will provide that savvy veteran leadership. I think you have to look overall at their roster and who they've signed in comparison to other teams, the overall aggregate activity. And I think that's where they're going to struggle. I don't know that they've improved their roster markedly like some other teams in the West have done. And so with that in mind, I think they're going to struggle a bit. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. But I believe they'll be better than Dallas. I believe that they'll, I don't think they make a charge for the playoffs.
It's going to be fascinating to see how they go. A few names: Samu Manoa, of course, played in Europe. Matthew Turner, a former player in Europe as well. JP Smith, he's been at the Sunwolves since 2019. So there's a few players to keep an eye out on for sure. And let's move on to the Utah Warriors. Had a decent year last year, didn't they? Finishing second in the Western Conference, third overall. Head coach Sean Pittman is there, former US Eagle as well. Scott, a very good year for them last year. Do you see them building on that once again and making a serious push for the title?
Absolutely. Utah is one of those sneaky teams. And I don't know if you guys have this in the UK, but, they play at altitude, right? So when you go to play them at home, it's a tough place to play. One, for the altitude. Two, they have fans that will sit in that freezing cold, snowy weather in March and scream for 80 minutes. And Rob knows that they're their fan base is one of the best. But I do think the altitude does play a role, and you see it when they play away. They play markedly with a little less intensity away, and I do think it has to do with playing and practicing at altitude. And if you guys, I encourage you to Google Zion Bank Stadium in Utah, because the pictures from that stadium, if God built the rugby stadium, that's the stadium he would build with the mountains behind it and the sunset and all that. I mean, it's amazingly beautiful place to play, but Utah hold it down. I mean, again, I me, I love to talk about front row. Paul Mullen, Eagle, Ali Khalifi, probably two of the best props in the league playing together on a team. Young prop Elijah Hayes backing them up, and Elijah's more of the offensive. Ali and Paul Mullen can run the ball, but they're really in that scrum machine, that engine room. Elijah likes to run the ball and has a little more wiggle room. And then our boy Mika Cruze at center and fullback, and he could play fly half, he could play wing. Pretty. I mean, if you ask Mika Cruze to play hooker, he'd probably do it. I do think this is the team that plays the spoiler to somebody and can end up in third. I think they do what they did last year. Play everybody hard, win their games. It came down to bonus points for them, so I think they're going to look for a little more offense in most of their games.
To be a bit more attacking. You just mentioned Mika Cruz there, 12 games last season, 30 points. It's a pretty decent record there. Rob, for you, are they going to push on and really get to that top level this year, do you think?
No, I actually, here's where Scott and I will disagree. I don't think they're going to have a shot at the playoffs this year. And the reason is, well, let me back up. We agree on one thing. It's a beautiful place to play. And one of the things that is, I think there are two notable things for fans of the UK who are watching the league with a key and interesting eye. Number one, the location is awesome. Number two, you've got a team that's selling out, that was selling out at the end of the last season, 4,200 butts in the seats. They were filling out the venue, and you've got a huge polyculture in Salt Lake City. So you have natural rugby fans that are gravitating towards the team. They get great support. It's an awesome place. They have on-site facilities, and the guys are actually living right across the street from the facility. So, while it's not the beaches of San Diego or LA, it certainly is a very convenient and warm and inviting place for a lot of your poly players because they feel comfortable in that environment, without the snow, that is. I think they're going to struggle because they lost the services. From what we understand, Michael Baska is not re-signed with the team. He's looking, he has his eyes on some foreign shores. Saul Mouching, we know, has already gone over to France. And then they lost their services, their fly half, German last name. It's slipped my mind. It's early in the morning here as we tape, so forgive me.
Yeah.
But who really kicked for possession when they needed to get that ball back in the in the defensive, on the attacking green zone, or put their opponents on the defensive. He could really put that ball into space. And will Mikey Teo, again, he's 1 year older. Will he still have that same hop step that he has during the normal season? So with the losses of two huge playmakers at 9 and 10, and the loss of an excellent Lucy, Cruze might struggle to get the ball, quite frankly, and that's where I think they're going to struggle, and why I think they'll miss the playoffs.
It's going to be interesting to see how that goes, and as well, because Scott thinks they're going to make it, and you don't. So
they could play spoiler, and I think it's they're the swing one. They're the swing team in the Western Conference. Yeah. I could see them completely failing and being in last place because their spine positions are now, one is older, two of them have been replaced by players who don't really have a pedigree that match other teams, right? But for some reason, and I think it's an attitude thing. Rob knows Paul Mullen is famous for slapping an opponent in the face before a scrum and not getting caught, despite doing it right in front of the referee. And not just referee, Scott Green is the head of the referees of the MLR. And that's the kind of attitude they bring. And you see it sometimes when they play teams that aren't as boisterous and physical, and they kind of get punched in the mouth in those first 20 minutes and throw them off their game. So that's why I'm not giving them a direct slot, but I could say that they could go in and ruin some people's chances.
So there we go. That's your preview for the Western Conference of Major League Rugby for the 2022 season. As always, a massive shout out to the guys from the Rugby Rant pod. Their links will be down below. They cover Major League Rugby and North American Rugby every single week, so make sure to check them out. Of course, there will be the Eastern Conference preview coming out tomorrow, so make sure to subscribe for that. Leave a like on this video and comment your predictions down below. I'll see you tomorrow for that preview. Don't forget as well, you can listen to this on Spotify. Links down below. Make sure to check it out. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and enjoy the MLR season.